Okay, today I'm at Ludlow with, I suppose we'd call you a journeyman bookmaker, Barry, Barry Pinno Pinnington. Bets from Perth to Exeter and all sorts of weird and wonderful places in between, unless I'm greatly mistaken. Thanks for agreeing to do this, Barry. Can you start from the beginning, your first interest, recollection of bookmaking or on-course gambling or whatever?
Yeah, I suppose I learned the habit of bookmaking and betting and gambling from my father. He was originally a greyhound owner up in Chester, where we lived at the time, and used to run a lot of greyhounds at Chester Greyhound Track and local tracks in the northwest, flapping tracks predominantly. I probably started going to Chester races round about when I was from the age of 10. Used to do the floor, run the line for him, give him the prices. My mum, God bless her, would do the clerking, the old booking tickets. And I would learn the trade from a very, very young basic age, to be honest with you. From the craft of running down to the line on the photographs, because in them days we used to bet on a short head, a dead heat, a head, half a length, etc., etc., and they used to be quite popular with punters. So of course, trying to get an edge over the punters is obviously paramount, being a bookmaker or a bookmaker's runner or doing the floor for my dad. So hence I used to initially ply my trade, looking across the line, albeit 10 or 11, getting a couple of the old stools, the old boxes, stand on the boxes, looking across at the line, which at Chester the grounds was two sides. You had a cheap ring, where my dad stood, and you'd have a deer side where obviously the likes of old man Mr. Corbett and all the big bookies, inverted commas, would stand. So we'd look directly across to the winning line, find out hopefully what I'd won, work out what I'd won. There'd be half a dozen of us legging it back then to the bookies, learning the tic-tac. My dad taught me tic-tac at an early age, but he always had to have a twist, my dad. And at Chester Dogs, it was always whatever had won had come second. So of course he'd have a twist card, he'd look down at his card, number 1, I'd be saying, Dad, it's number 3. In fact, he'd look down, it's number 1. Here we go, everybody. They'd all dive in, watching me, thinking I'd given the right result, and of course he'd cream a bit off the top. So that was my first recollection, Simon, of bookmaking and the craft, if you like, and know-how of doing the floor, and that was my first introduction, really.
So, do you remember the first day you came out betting under your own steam with your own money?
Well, initially, it used to be dead man's shoes. So my father, he'd actually gone from poacher to gamekeeper. He used to have greyhounds, did his money, and then decided to go betting, bookmaking. And so hence, I think in the 70s, late 70s, he put his name down on all the Northwest lists. And it used to be, they call it dead man's shoes, because basically you might have 100 names on the list for each different individual ring, tats, silver ring, Chester. Of course, you've got the course or the goat yard. Put your name down as many lists as you can, cost you £1, and then you'd either just turn up on the day and hope there's pitches available, which in general most places there were, although obviously on good days he wouldn't get on off a really high number, solely because obviously a good day, the money's around, all the bookmakers with the good positions would turn up. So it was more so we would turn up, I would turn up with my dad, clerking, the old booking tickets, like I say, to some of the poorer meetings. So, and he would have poor pitches. So I suppose when it comes down to learning the craft, it's not like he was thrown into the deep end in good pitches. It was basically being thrown into the deep end with poor pitches. So you would have to learn quite quickly, otherwise you wouldn't last for the next week, because because you're betting poorly in a poor position. Even in those days when the figures were good, in a poor position you still bet poorly. So hence I used to go along and I would clerk for him, and obviously pick up on everything that's sort of going on with regards to the tic-tacking, the floor, better prices over there, when you lay off, when to lay a favourite maybe, the highs and lows of doing things properly or making quite a few ricks. So I worked for my dad for quite a long time. One of the first instances where I moved away to Devon and lived down in Devon for a few years after my mother died, one of the first instances, which I thought was quite funny looking back on it, but my dad didn't at the time, he was short of a clerk for Cheltenham, and he had a Cheltenham pitch in the Silver Ring in the Best Mate. Poor pitch, but in those days, we're looking at probably 30 years ago, the ring was like very, very good in Cheltenham in general. And bookmaking in those days was very good, even off poor pitches, which is more we can say for sort of nowadays. So of course we go. He rings me up. I'm living in Devon. I've got a full-time job. Not seen much of him. Barry, I need a clerk. I said, look, Dad, I'm sorry, I can't really work. You know, I've got other work on. I need a clerk. Booking tickets. You know, can you come, son? Well, I can't really, Dad. I'll make it worth your while. I'll put you a quarter in the book. Oh, right, okay, then that's, you know, I'm thinking that might be more to my liking. So, yeah, all right then. Okay, you twisted my arm. Anyway, cut a long story short, we go to Cheltenham. We actually win 10 grand. We win £10,000 over 4 days that week. Unbelievable results. My dad did everything right, which was quite unusual at times. Did everything right, and of course, I'm clocking up. I'm in for a quarter here, boys and girls. And I've never seen somebody so broken-hearted as when my dad had to, even though it's his own offspring, his own son, and everything else, had to hand over £2,500 to me, which would normally cost him maybe £200 or £300 just to pay the clerk, and he'd get the rest of the bunts. So basically, he gave me £2,500 out of his own pocket, inverted commas, even though I was like different class on the book, I might have you had. So that was one of my first recollections. And after that, he never put me in the book again. So, of course, I then thought, right, I quite fancy doing a bit of this myself. Obviously, when you're earning that sort of money, a month's wage in 4 days, then, you know, the bottom line is, I'd like to maybe try this myself. So then I looked into it all, got my licence, but instead of applying to the, it was the BPA then, instead of applying to the BPA, I thought, right, I'll rep for my dad. And my dad had quite a lot of poorish pitches, but he doubled up quite often in certain places, point to points, or silver ring at the likes of Ludlow, where we are today. A poorish ring, with all due respect to Ludlow at the time, a poorish ring, but at least I could go out and work and learn my trade, if you like, and ply my trade. And that's what I did. So sort of late 80s, early 90s, I would just go out weekends and work in the pitches that my dad didn't want to work in, and trade under his name, which is Stute. He traded as Stute a lot of the northern tracks. So that's how roughly I got into sort of bookmaking on my own steam, off my own back.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong, you bet in Scotland and you bet in Devon. So how did you go about amassing and how did you manage such a big portfolio of pitches?
Well, to be honest, Simon, in 1998, I think it was, and I think it was probably after going to the Derby a few times, which was quite lucrative. You know, stand up on the hill, you could plonk your joint anywhere. They would come along and just check your licence, and really, you might not all know about John Batten, but John Batten was the guy who probably not even John Batten, but set up the name John Batten, put his tripod and joint up in the middle of the hill on the Derby, forged a gambling licence, or not a gambling licence, but a licence, which we all had to show on the day. Stood, went bigger prices, God knows what it's like, till the bookies standing next to him in the line thinking, who's this idiot come along, another one who hasn't got a clue. But little did they know he was going to do a runner halfway through the Derby. You know, he was apparently he was training to do the 100 metre sprint beforehand. So all he did was push the prices out, get as much as he could in, fill his hod, and then leg it. And his name was John Batten, or his alias was John Batten. So after that, I think the regulations became a lot tighter. A lot of things were tightened up, and hence we then the AGT, the BPA then sort of probably were told to tighten everything up, and that's when buying and selling came in. So buying and selling, so it wasn't in the rings, it wasn't dead man's shoes, where obviously as somebody dies, the whole list moves up. It might take you 40 years to get into Cheltenham Tats at the time, or Ascot Tats. So buying and selling came in, and that predominantly changed the whole scenario for me as a part-time weekend rep for my dad. It meant that I could ply my trade on racecourses under my own steam, under my own name. So that's when the buying and selling first came in, and the early auctions came in, whereby all the old guys could sell the pitches. Obviously, instead of maybe retiring in the past and losing the pitch and everybody else move up, now they could sell the pitches, and they could obviously get a few bob depending on what number it was, how many they had, etc., etc. So there was a big change in the rings then, and instead of then waiting to get onto a race course, you could actually buy number one, number two, whatever became available. If you had the funds, if you had the inclination, or if you fancied going into certain racetracks, your dream could come true. So it brought a lot of fresh blood into the ring. And so I looked at this and I thought, yeah, okay, I didn't have a lot of money, to be fair. I was a working man through the week. So I thought, right, okay, I quite fancy this, So I decided to buy, the answer to your question, Simon, is cheap pitches, which I think looking back on was probably not the right thing to do. But I thought, right, I'm going to make this a career whereby I want to go out, 7 days a week, if possible, 7 days a week. So I thought, right, I'm going to buy as many cheapish pitches as I could at lots of different race courses. And they were quite cheap, although, however, looking back at it now, some I paid, for argument's sake, Uttoxeter, I'm number 34. Now, I like going to Uttoxeter. That pitch is probably now worth maybe £2,000 if I'm lucky. I paid in the region of £6,500 for, whereby if I'd have bought a pitch at Ascot, Royal Ascot, say a similar sort of number 33, I probably could have bought it for maybe 4,000 or 5,000, and it's now worth 25 grand. So I didn't buy particularly well, but however, I wanted it to be a career, and I wanted to go out on a daily basis, which is what I've done to this day. So hence, from Perth to Exeter, or Newton Abbot I had until I sold a couple of years ago, answering your question, all down the west coast generally, just to get a day's work. So I'd go to Hexham, and then, right, okay, I can now go on to Ayr, or I can go on to and stay away. And my wife and I used to do a lot of travelling together, and it's not only travelling, it's also enjoying, going into new towns, new places, game of golf up in Scotland, or go and see relatives in Devon, go and stay in Torquay, have 2 or 3 nights in Torquay, do Exeter, do Newton Abbot, do Taunton, albeit poor pitches, but still having the confidence to sort of feel as if I can make it pay out of all pitches, because I mean, you can make it pay. Most bookmakers make it pay, otherwise they go by the wayside. But everyone has their own way of doing things. Whether they bet without the favourite, without 2 favourites, bet on the aways, depending where your pitch is, how busy it is, what ring you go into. There's a lot of anomalies having a lot of different pitches, albeit cheaper ones.
So, what is your strategy? Do you study and bet to an opinion?
I bet to an opinion, Simon. Yeah, more so, to be quite honest with you, over jumps, because I feel with jumps, I have a better chance, solely because I'd be like, okay, today's not a great example where you've got a 1 to 10 and a 1 to 4 in the first 2 races, but you can generally, as a bookmaker, get the short ones in at the right price. So 6 to 4, opposed to go to Chester and it'll be 3 or 4 to 1 the field. Now, if I want to stand a favourite and stand it for X amount, let's say £500, I can lay a 600 for 4, I've got £400 in my bag. If it's a 3 or 4 to 1 poke, I've got £150 in my bag. So hence I need to put more. I need to probably lay a few more of the short ones. Whereby if I study the form and the ground goes soft or heavy or changes, and there's a short one that I can look through and think, well, that's probably not going to quite go on the ground. I know if I stand it and it gets beat, I can get a reasonable amount of money in my back pocket. It doesn't always stand like that, but I do a reasonable amount of form, yes.
Okay, and you were mentioned recently in dispatches by professional punter Neil Channing on Luck on Sunday. You going to duck him if he turns up at your pitch?
Well, I mean, no. Actually, I'm not going. I've never ducked anyone, to be quite honest with you. I've never ducked anyone. I try and oblige people, even in this day and age where we live in a world of light boards. So people. It can change on the exchanges, and as you know, Simon, we're all slaves to the exchanges these days, which I hate, really, to be quite honest with you. But unfortunately, when we're on course now, we don't have too much choice about going over the odds on Betfair, going under the odds. Then other people will be higher than you, up to the bone. So when you get, if you like, professional players like Neil coming in, although they don't come into the ring very often now since the advent of exchanges, because in general, they can get their money on the exchanges within reason, although some markets can be quite weak. They've been trading for 24 hours, prices for 24 hours. In the old days, of course, it used to be the old tissue price would turn up, it'll be 20 minutes before the off, or we're not quite sure what price is going to be what until then, whereas now, the exchanges have been trading for 24 hours, the price on course towards the off, even quarter one out of the off, is basically not far off what that horse price should be.